When the unsolved cases go cold, they eventually end up in this small room. Inside the boxes,
the paper's even old.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Files where you can see and almost smell the time that's passed.
A heart-wrenching tragedy comes to a family's doorstep.
Tonight on a 40-year-old
His death was a homicide, but his killer
and
remains
when
on the
police
loose.
can't find the murderer,
Police are telling us as many as 10
this was the most heinous, cold-blooded murder case he's ever encountered.
You stab, you stab, you stab.
According tonight, an arrest in the rape and murder of a woman killed 17 years ago.
Start whispering among themselves and pointing fingers at those suspects, and tales lead nowhere.
You may not remember their names, but these are the faces of hundreds of victims who've been murdered.
1975.
Cops say an unexpected break in this tragic cold case
40 years ago.
Their cases remain unsolved.
Even though they couldn't tie anyone to the crime.
We have a lot of information.
Hundreds of murder cases yet to be solved.
We're always a little bit short of putting
rumors started coming in, or the stories started coming in from the street.
Maybe their conscience just got to them after all these years. They, you know what, maybe I better talk.
Why would you keep this information if you have it? Why would you keep it? A man has died here. Let's bring it to the surface.
She deserves justice. This needs to be solved.
At the end of April, in 1980, there was an Orlando Sentinel article titled, "Police Are Puzzled as the Bodies Pile Up," written by John Wark. It's not the moon and it's not the time of year. No one seems to know why so many people are being slain in Central Florida. But in the past 2 weeks, the bodies of 2 young friends, one a young woman who had run away from home, were pulled from Anapopka Canal. A dead man was discovered in a shallow grave near Kissimmee. Another man was shot between the eyes outside of an ABC bar. Human bones were discovered scattered in a Volusia field. A missing Montverde teenager's body was found behind Kmart off 1792 in Seminole County. A 39-year-old roofer was shot on his doorstep, apparently during a domestic argument. A man was stabbed to death, and his suspected slayer fled in a high-speed chase. The chase ended when he crashed, killing a passing motorist. A 27-year-old man was killed by a hit-and-run driver in a pickup truck near the Park Avenue Disco. In unincorporated Orange County alone, there have been 13 homicides since the first of the year. That's 4 months.
With only 7 Orange County homicide investigators, the recent rash of murders has begun to strap us mentally.
Captain Stan Yerkowitz, who heads the Orlando County Sheriff's Criminal Intake Division. Sheriff Melvin Coleman's office is subdued as he, Yerkowitz, and Orange County's top homicide investigator, Sergeant Mel Sears, talk above piped-in music about the recent wave of murders, which they agree is unusual only because so many have occurred over a relatively brief period. But, 1 floor below the office, computers chatter, phones ring, reports are being written, and investigators are huddling over puzzling cases. 3 out of 7 of the county's homicide investigators haven't had a day off in 2 weeks. 2 others worked over the weekend on the murder victims found in the Apopka Canal. Their days became 19 hours long as they slept no more than 5 hours a night. They took 1 day off and were back on the job Tuesday. Meanwhile, the overtime piles up. In the first 3 weeks of April alone, the homicide section chalked up about 100 hours of overtime. 2 of Orlando's 9 homicides have yet to be solved. 3 of the 13 slayings in Orange County have not been cleared, but deputies have good leads in 2 other cases. Bodies continue to be discovered, floating to the surface of streams and lakes, or pushing up the earth from shallow graves, as if their unjustly taken lives sought discovery and were demanding an accounting.
Sometimes you can look up at the full moon when it's hot and humid and say, "That's it, here we go." But then other times, it's a full moon and it's quiet as could be.
Sears is also quick to point out that Florida's orange groves, swamps, and sinkholes offer ideal places for hiding murder victims. An average of 600 reports on runaways and missing persons flood the sheriff's department each month, and investigators must sift through all of them each time a body is found that they cannot identify. But at any given time, there is an average of 60 people listed as unlocatable. The tough ones police call whodunits. The easier murder investigations are smoking guns. But even those murders, like the ABC bar shooting, require a mound of paperwork.
Tempers get short after about 3 days. It's not a pleasant task to watch an autopsy performed. It's not a pleasant task to tell relatives and friends that a relation has been murdered. You can't sum up homicide.
It's not the moon and it's not the weather. You can't make a mistake in a homicide, as if you do, you can kiss it goodbye.
This is season 22 of Down and Away, the Orlando series. Of that list of 8 homicides that occurred in a 2-week period in April of 1980, 2 are still open today, even decades after that fraught newspaper article was published, lamenting the bodies piling up. Georgia Cruz was a 12-year-old taken from one county and dumped in another. On April 16, 1980, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office discovered her body behind the Kmart Plaza on Highway 1792 in Fern Park. She had been last seen alive 8 days earlier, shortly before she left home on foot, heading for a convenience store, approximately 1.5 miles away. The 2 young friends mentioned early in the article that were fished out of the Apopka Canal were found 3 days apart, and interestingly, in almost the exact same spot. 16-year-old Pam McIntosh and 22-year-old Randy Belvin. She was beat to death. He died of a gunshot wound. The 12-year-old and the 2 friends, those cases occurred within a couple days of one another and were just 2 out of 8 cases that happened during one very busy homicide season in the Central Florida area. 25% of that week's homicides in 1980 still being unsolved over 40 years later? That is perplexing. By the time Emma Vaughn went missing, they were already carrying a significant backlog of unsolved homicide and missing persons cases. What do you remember about what was going on in her life around the time that she went missing? Here's Emma's sister, Brenda.
Well, she was pregnant. She had her son, and she left with an 18-year-old girl. She said she'd be back, and she never came back.
Was she pregnant before you guys got to Florida?
That I don't know. She used to be a runaway. She'd run away. She didn't want to listen. She didn't,
How many?
She used to call the fire department and tell them our house was on fire and everything else. So she was in a place for pregnant women.
Do you know why she would have been calling?
To get her help, I guess.
Yeah. Do you know why that she would have been calling the fire department and causing that kind of commotion?
Nope.
Emma Vaughn has been missing since 1982, and she was just 14 years old when she disappeared. As the story goes, Emma was last seen walking down Robinson Street in Orlando, Florida on July 10th, 1982. The online reports say that Emma may have been sighted in the area shortly afterwards, but that's an unsubstantiated report. The online blurbs say she had a history as a runaway prior to her disappearance, but had always kept in touch with her family. The online reports further opined that Emma Vaughn had last been seen in the company of someone leaving the state, but again, there doesn't seem to be any substance to this. Just a bunch of hearsay and rumors in place of facts. Most of the online reports note that Emma, quote, also associated with prostitutes and exotic dancers. Some comment boards then taking that to mean she was herself a sex worker or dancer, because apparently it's so much easier to be salacious than accurate. Her siblings that I interviewed at length vehemently deny this, going so far to say that those were intentional reports to make Emma seem like someone that she wasn't.
There were times that we went down and sat outside of these strip clubs for we'd sit and wait in the dark. We didn't have a car, so
Who would sit out?
we'd walk down there.
All of you kids?
And me and my brother and mom and my younger sister and we would sit and James. Actually, we called him Ronnie.
Okay.
You might hear somebody refer to somebody as Ronnie. That's him.
Okay.
We would sit outside these strip clubs and wait for the strippers to come out and see if we've seen her. But we never seen anybody even look like her, and it didn't feel right to me anyway. She wasn't that kind of person, I don't think. I mean,
you're talking about after she went missing, your family would go and you would sit outside on Orange Blossom Trail on these different clubs to see if you'd see her. Okay. 2 of Emma's siblings told me that they never remembered any problems with Emma before they moved to Florida, or at least shortly before. She was described to me as a normal kid until the move to Florida, and then it started immediately. When we hit Florida soil, Emma became public enemy number 1 in our house, to everyone except us younger 2 siblings. Now, if that's true, that is a change that you would want to explore, I would think, because we're talking about a 13-year-old kid at the time. And I found myself wondering, why Florida? Why did the whole family move to Florida? The siblings that I spoke to wondered that as well.
He got out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
We never met him. And Mom had just been pen pals with him, And one day he showed up with, I don't know if it was his brother or son or I don't know, somebody. And a U-Haul truck. And, of course, I was probably, I was 5 or 6, I guess.
Now, did you guys have a house that you lived in before she met this man?
We lived in the housing projects at Papa Bluff, Missouri. And we lived there for, as long as I will. I don't remember living anywhere else up to the time we moved. He didn't know anyone down there or anything. I'm not really sure why we moved there, but...
Do you remember what year that was that you first moved there?
I'm going to say 81.
So you hadn't been there that long before
No, we hadn't been there long at all.
And who lived in the household at the time?
It was myself, my brother Jason, my sister Brenda, Emma, and my brother Roy. And that's from youngest to oldest. Okay. And then it was my mom and James Cannon. And then his son showed up. His name was Donnie Cannon. He's now dead from an overdose of some kind of heroin or something. He showed up and stuck around for a few months, and then shortly after she disappeared, he moved away. I don't know what that was about either. I was young.
Right. How old were you at the time?
9.
Okay. So you were very young. What was she going to school when you guys first got Emma? When you guys first got to Florida?
No.
So she
was before we left. Before we moved to Florida. But I know she didn't get in Florida. She didn't go to school at all. She never was enrolled or anything.
So she never went to school in Florida at all?
Not that I remember.
That makes it seem like... But she was going to school when you guys were in Missouri?
Yes.
So that makes it seem like maybe she got pregnant right around the time you guys moved, doesn't it? Because did the rest of you guys the rest of you guys were going to school?
Yes.
So that I mean, I don't think she would not be going to school with everybody else unless she couldn't.
Yeah, and I didn't even thought about that. Well, it just opens my eyes to different things. But yeah, you're probably right. She was probably pregnant. Probably might have been why we made the move. I don't know. We moved there with knowing no one there, with no money. I mean, we moved there on a welfare check. All she had was a welfare check and food stamps.
Oh, got you. And he didn't work.
No. Mom went to work at some kind of day labor place for a month or two or something. She's, that was it. But actually, we were homeless when we got down there, and I don't know how they wrangled this place to stay, but.
They told me that Ronnie, their mother's live-in boyfriend, did not work, and that their mom picked up sporadic day labor work, and that they hadn't been in Florida for long before, quote, Emma and Ronnie were at each other all the time. She fought Ronnie almost daily, and she would fight with her brothers if they picked on the youngest, or otherwise felt that they deserved it.
We were really abused, okay? Ronnie was a mean son of a gun. And he would beat us and beat us in. She would jump right in the middle of a beating and jump on his back or whatever. And of course he would overpower her and he'd beat her instead. But she always felt like she needed to be around.
To keep an eye on you guys?
Keep us from getting beat. It was a daily thing. We got beat every day.
Oh, jeez.
So, and it wasn't like just with belts or switches, or, it was beating with your fist, or one time he stabbed me.
Oh, Jesus. Sounds like she wasn't afraid to stick up for herself.
No. No one else would stick up for her, though.
Was she the only one that would stand up to him?
Yes, she was the only one. Was
there any thought that maybe he had done something to her?
Well, probably 15 years ago, maybe not even that long ago, I contacted the Orange County Sheriff's Department to see where the investigation was. And, and the woman said, it's a cold case, and she wanted to do fresh interviews. So my brother Jason and I both agreed, and we went to the local police department and did a phone interview with a detective from down there in the detective's office. They said that Ronnie was so old now, if he's even still alive, that it would be almost fruitless to even try and hunt him down to question him,
Emma was brave, the bravest person I've ever known. Her youngest brother told me. Emma had a baby that was born at the end of February 1982. If that timeline is correct, Emma was very possibly, even likely, pregnant before they arrived in Florida. And that makes this even more troubling, because the sibling who told me the Nick story was certain that it occurred back in Missouri, before they even moved to Florida. This sibling ran into the house one day to use the bathroom, while their mother was out, flinging Emma's door open mischievously as he ran down the hall. When he witnessed Ronnie, her mother's live-in boyfriend, and Emma in bed under the covers, he was on top of her. According to this sibling, Ronnie screamed, "Get the hell out of here." Emma's sibling slammed the door and went on to the bathroom, at that time not fully understanding what was going on, thinking, she's getting beat up, he's beating her up, because by then, the beatings were a regular occurrence.
There was one time that she reported as a runaway. It was after she jumped in the middle of a bad beating that I was taking.
That you were taking?
Yes, he would beat on us every day. And, and he beat her pretty good, and she left. And she didn't come back for 3 or 4 days. And the police had went and found where she's at anyway. They made her come back home.
They brought her home.
She hadn't been a runaway besides that. I mean, she was too scared to come home.
John had described quite a bit of physical abuse, that the Ronnie, the guy that lived with your mom, was abusing her and the other kids. Do you recall that?
I couldn't tell you. I don't remember that far back. All I know is she used to run away. She used to tell them our house was on fire, and she had an attitude problem.
You don't remember him hitting you or beating on you?
No.
Okay, do you remember him beating?
Not that I can recall.
What about your brothers? Do you remember him beating on your brothers?
If he did, I ain't never seen it. So I don't know, hon.
So you don't, from your memory, you don't remember any fighting between him and the kids, or physical altercations?
Oh, I try to put all that out of my head about everything. All I know is I think she's still alive. And you know what gets me is when she ran away, they found her, brought her back. Every time, at this time, when Mom called them and told them she never made it home, they couldn't find her.
Emma Vaughn moved to Central Florida with her mother, siblings, and the man named Ronnie, who her mother would live with for about 7 years in total. Ronnie and Emma's mother had been pen pals while he was in prison for an offense that got him a sentence of 15 years because he was tried as a repeat offender for robbery in the first degree by means of a dangerous and deadly weapon. Ronnie and his brother robbed the Velvet Freeze store in St. Louis in April of 1971, and the clerk in the store that day described him as having the meanest eyes that she had ever seen. "I've seen bulls that didn't have any meaner eyes, and I wouldn't be married to anyone like that." That line came directly out of court documents. Emma's mom never married Ronnie, but she and her kids did live with him long enough for his looming presence to leave a lasting impact on all of them. Ronnie's own son, Donnie, had already begun committing crimes just like his father, robberies, in his early teens, and his daughter Rhonda would have a long criminal history after Florida. One could now argue, with the benefit of time behind us all, that the lives of the Vaughn family may have been drastically different had their lives not collided with the Cannons. Ronnie Cannon's daughter Rhonda had come down to Florida with them, and his 20-year-old son paid them a visit in Florida later. Now, there was a mention of someone that I guess that had last seen her named Rhonda Cannon. That must have been James's daughter then?
Yes, but I'm not sure that she last seen her or not. Mom said she was seen with some prostitutes, but I didn't run with no prostitutes. I think Rhonda Cannon was running with some of that bunch. But
so the Rhonda girl that allegedly left with that day, that was Ronnie's daughter. Did she live there with you guys in Florida?
She stayed with us for a little while. And she left with this dude named Spike, I think.
Named.
She come back 3 weeks later, and Emma wasn't with her.
And you don't know where they had left to go the last time you saw them?
No, but my mom gave her an ass whooping. I'm sorry.
Did she? What?
Yes, my mom did.
What did
she said, I want to know where my daughter is right now. Yeah.
And what did Rhonda say?
It got bad. My mom was fighting that girl. I mean, any mother, I'm sure, would have done it.
Did Emma ever say who the father of the baby was?
I want to say they said Donnie Cannon.
So Donnie was who? Ronnie's
son.
You were told that Donnie was the father then?
Yeah, he died in Park Bluff, I think.
So is he sure that's his father?
That's what they're saying.
And that was his
father.
father.
Mom would never change his name. Mom wouldn't let him, He said, Grandma, I want to meet him. Grandma said, I don't think you need to go meet him. Because, we ain't for sure if that's really your dad or not.
Gotcha. Okay.
We're just going to by hearsay that was his daddy.
Ronnie was described to me as a vicious, mean man who always had the kids on edge. Emma's siblings told me that they felt their mother would often hurry to reprimand them if they were horsing around or doing anything she thought might trigger Ronnie from doing the disciplining himself. Now, obviously that was her way of protecting them. And the desperately sad irony here is that Emma saw her mom doing that, and she understood it, because she started doing it too, mirroring what she saw her mother doing, trying to protect them. Emma was fiercely protective of the youngest brother, who was only 9 years old when she went missing. Was she at home every night in bed? Where she, like when you guys are all...
Yeah, every night that I knew of. Every day she was home. Usually during the day when we were at school is when, she was gone, if she went anywhere.
And she had a baby that she was taking care of, right, in that home?
Yes. She was taking care of him too. My mom wasn't taking care. Emma was taking care of him.
How old was the baby when she went missing?
Baby was born February 23rd, and she went missing July 10th.
Jeez. So she was literally taking care of that baby. I mean, she had like a little crib in her room. She was in that you guys all lived.
Yeah.
I heard stories of abuse, ranging from being hit with a hammer, slapped and thrown across the room, a heavy ashtray slung across the room, being knocked out, being stabbed with a fork. And boy, oh boy, you were not allowed to help the one getting a beating, or you would get beat too. But Emma, she would jump in often. Once, I'm told, right on Ronnie's back to get him off of her younger brother. Emma, they told me, was a fighter. While it's not known whether 13-year-old Emma was pregnant before she arrived in Florida, or she became so once she reached the Sunshine State, I think we can all agree that a 13-year-old pregnant child, because that's what a 13-year-old is, a child, certainly points to some significant familial breakdown. I wondered why Emma would be painted by some in the family as a troublemaking child, rather than a troubled one. And that bothered me.
Is there anything you remember just before, any incident occurring just before Emma went missing? Anything going on with...
I remember that Emma, just the day before maybe, she had gotten into it with Vaughn. She jumped, because he just started in on us, and she knew what was coming. If she didn't intervene, then it was going to start. The abuse was going to start physically happening. So if she was there, she would intervene and divert it from us. Okay, well, he was after me, and he ended up shoving a biscuit down her throat anyway, and she about choked to death on it. Ronnie did, and the details, but I remember that happened. That was probably the day before, maybe. And so.
Did she go missing during the day or at night, or you don't know? When was the last time you ever seen her?
She didn't show up that night. My mom said, she didn't come home.
What kind of things set off Ronnie?
Everything.
Did he seem to have more of a dislike for Emma than any of you other kids?
I don't know if he disliked her anymore. He didn't like any of us.
But she was the only one that would challenge him.
She was the one that would fight.
Okay.
She was the one that would.
Okay. That makes sense. And it sounds like there was some incident with the biscuit that he shoved down her throat that occurred in close proximity to the time that she...
Yes, it was a day or two before, something like that. It was right at that time, because I remember I thought she was going to choke to death.
I think we really have to be intellectually curious enough to ask ourselves why a pregnant 13-year-old, because that's how old she was when she got pregnant. She was 14 when she went missing. But I think we need to be intellectually curious enough to ask ourselves why a pregnant 13-year-old might call the fire department. Why she might be fighting constantly with a live-in boyfriend of her mother. Why she might be running away. And why she might have an attitude problem. Because children are not born bad or evil or unruly. They are molded by their surroundings. And for Emma, it sounds like calling the fire department for a house on fire was more metaphorical than literal, because she was most certainly living
in an emotional house on fire. And as it turns out, she was in very real danger. We were on our tippy toes and on edge all the time around him. That's how intimidating he was, said one brother. Now, online blurbs about Emma say that she had a history of being a runaway, and her younger siblings told me that's why. She would get beat and she would leave, sometimes for a couple days, but they said she would always come back, and she never wanted to be gone long because she was worried about the safety of her younger siblings, particularly the youngest boy. While they lived in Florida, Emma was enrolled in the Beta House, a facility just a couple miles from where they lived at the time, within walking distance. But within walking distance was pretty much anywhere that they needed to go or wanted to go, because the family didn't have a vehicle. Beta House stood for Birth, Education, Training, and Acceptance, and it was located at 419 North Magnolia Avenue. It was touted as a home for unwed mothers, and they had 25 beds at the time. It was entirely privately financed and organized, with a staff of volunteers who provided free services to women up to and including living quarters while they were pregnant. A short documentary called Sweet 16 and Pregnant was filmed, partly at the Beta House, in the summer of 1981, and you can find it online. Beta House would have been a refuge for Emma during her pregnancy, but afterwards she would have to return home. Return to the abuse. Her siblings say that she was back and forth anyway. She would spend 4 or 5 days at the Beta House, and then she'd come home to keep an eye on her siblings. They felt that she was only gone there in total for a few weeks. And then when Emma gave birth, she brought the baby home to live with them. That baby was named Donnie, after Ronnie, the live-in boyfriend's son, who was 7 years older than Emma, and who had visited them for a short time while they were in Florida, according to the siblings. I've spoken to that child, Donnie, who is now a man, and I think that the trauma that he has endured related to his familial lineage is something that he probably won't ever shake off. It's going to always be there, because some wounds are too deep. But the important thing to remember is that it was only 4 or 5 months after her baby was born that Emma disappeared. She no longer had the refuge of the Beta House, and she was a 14-year-old girl with a baby of her own who lived with someone who was abusing her and her siblings. How did everybody react to the baby when she brought the baby home?
We took care of him.
So it wasn't like a problem in the house to have the baby there. Everybody was okay with it, like her mom and everyone else in the house, like the adults.
My mom.
Okay.
My mom raised him like he was her own.
It drove her crazy. She's not the same person she was before.
No, I know.
And every year or two, there's some police agency will send her some paperwork or call her and say, we need you to agree to let us check dental records. We found the body, might be her.
Yeah.
And then you wait, and then, it just brings so much back up.
And was he beating her too, Cannon?
No, he never raised his hand to her, ever.
Really? That's strange.
Never. No, he never yelled at her, nothing.
Was she supporting him financially in any way?
Completely. She got
there it is.
Government check and food stamps on us, and he didn't have to do a thing.
That's why he wasn't doing anything to her, because she was, his meal ticket. That makes sense. I mean, in a sick way, obviously. This whole thing is sick, but...
Oh, yeah.
One of her siblings told me, Emma was mean, She was angry all the time. But it wasn't always like that. She had a real good reason to be angry. When I asked that sibling whether they recalled any problems with Emma before the move to Florida, before Ronnie moved in with them, their immediate response was no. It all started when we moved to Florida. It all started with Ronnie. To me, it also seemed to coincide with that pregnancy, if you look close enough at the timeline. And there's nothing natural or appropriate about a pregnant 13-year-old. A 13-year-old child is not emotionally equipped to be in that situation. Never mind deal with it while dealing with a violent, abusive parental figure and trying to protect your younger siblings. The Emma that was described to me was hypervigilant, to the point that she would pounce on one brother, beating on him for putting the younger brother in the line of fire, over simple things like horsing around in the house. Emma's behavior is classic, textbook behavior of an abused child. I don't think it's fair to say that she was a bad kid. It wasn't as simple as her being incorrigible or unruly or defiant. Her behavior was very clearly a response to what was being done to her, and it is unfair to classify it in any way other than that. And while we're being clear about things, Emma did not just disappear. We know people don't just disappear, they don't suddenly vanish, and more often than not, they don't just up and leave their baby, particularly in a home where they know abuse is occurring, and then go and create a whole new life for themselves, never contacting another family member ever again, especially in this case, the youngest, who she was fiercely protective of. And we all also know that many, many missing persons cases fell into the woodwork decades ago in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, even the 90s, at a time when they weren't prioritized unless the victim was seen being yanked into a vehicle and being kidnapped against their will. Generally, we know better now, and hopefully more often than not we do better now. But in 1982, the newspaper wasn't full of articles about Emma Lorraine Vaughn going missing from Orlando, Florida. There was no sense of urgency about this 14-year-old being gone, at least in the form of breaking news reports or articles in the local paper. In fact, if you go back and look at the archived newspaper articles now, you'll notice that there weren't any articles printed about Emma going missing around the time that she allegedly disappeared on July 10th, 1982. So how can the public and people with information help locate someone when they don't even know that she's gone? If they don't even know that they're supposed to care. When I spoke with someone who had talked with investigators many years later, calling to inquire about Emma's case, that person told me that they were informed it was a cold case, but the discussion about who might be responsible did not center around some mysterious person that she had left the state with, or even around sex workers or strippers on Orange Blossom Trail. No, it appears that their investigation was centered around a spot a little closer to home. And that was my first indication that what the reports online have led us to believe held less facts than narrative building to make people think that Emma Vaughn was someone other than who she was. A 13-year-old mother of an infant who had been subjected to violence within her home, who one night didn't come home. Family members who spoke with law enforcement over the years told me that they were told by the investigators that Emma had visited a pregnancy crisis center right before she disappeared. Another family member told me that police had mentioned using psychics who suggested that Emma was in a body of water facing a school. And I heard yet another story from a family member about investigators urging Emma's mother to write down any information that she might know on a piece of paper and put it in a safe deposit box to be opened only after her death. This seems like an odd offer, something that indicates that they believed at least that she had some sort of information critical to the understanding of this case, and at the time may have been afraid or unwilling to share it. So how do you tell a story when the storylines are fuzzy, but the details, they are clear enough to evoke visceral sense memories to those who saw it? How do you paint a picture when the drawing began long ago with an outline that wasn't true enough to bring the real image to the page? How do you tell a story when the teller has been gaslit into thinking their lying eyes and ears deceived them? How do you tell a story when almost everyone in it is a victim, and the trauma left behind scarred everyone involved? How do you tell a story with the hope of giving someone long gone a voice, while trying to protect the voices that are doing the telling? Protect them from knowing things that they think they know, but for decades have been afraid to say out loud. There was a late afternoon rainstorm that day in Florida, a day like many before it. The summer of 1982 in Florida brought record rainfall. In fact, the whole year up to that point, that area and surrounding areas had seen inches of rain higher than the historical average. An Orlando Sentinel article dated July 25, 1982, 15 days after Emma allegedly went missing, noted, quote, "Better than average rainfall this year in Central Florida. More than 32 inches of rain have washed through Orange County since January, putting the total about 4 inches above average. March, April, and May were particularly wet months with 7 inches more than normal rainfall. June in neighboring Lake County was the wettest in 5 years." Residents who lived around some of those smaller lakes in the Orlando area said that the water was higher that year than they had seen in a decade. Those are the types of details that are important when you are fact-checking a story. A simple phrase like, "I remember the water was high," leads someone like me down a path of historical weather research that ends with me saying, yep, what that person said about the decades-old memory fits with the facts. But I want to just slightly go back a bit, back before this night, the night, and picture a week or two before. And Emma is walking across the street to use the phone with a sibling. She called her father, who lived in another state, and she was crying and begging him to let her come live with him. The sibling is trying to grab the phone. "Let me talk to him. Let me talk to him." And Emma's twisting around with the receiver in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she'd say, and then listen for a few minutes before crying out, "In a month or two it's going to be too late." Picture a dejected 14-year-old Emma walking back across the street as her sibling, who can feel something is wrong, slips his hand in hers because somehow he realizes that something out of his grasp might be going on.
My real dad is dead and gone now, but he said when he was alive, she wrote him a letter asking him if she could come and live with him. He told her no. So.
Another sibling remembered an incident a day or so before Emma went missing. She had gotten into it with Ronnie. He had started in on the youngest child and she intervened. So Ronnie shoved a biscuit down her throat and she almost choked. But the day it happened, as the story went, it reached 90 degrees in Florida and had only cooled down to about 75 as they drove to that place. It felt like a short drive from where they lived. It was nighttime and the moon was bright, and being out at night in a car together, well, that was a novelty. They didn't go places very often. The heavy-set guy who was driving wasn't a family member, but it was his car.
I think some of Randy's, which was Brenda's. Later on, we moved back down there. I was 13, I guess, 14, so yeah. And Brenda hooked back up with him. His name was Randy, I think. Big fat guy.
A friend of Brenda's.
Yeah.
The car pulled off a main paved road and turned to the right, and the lake was off to the right of the main road. The car drove just a short distance on that gravel road, on the far side of the lake, and then turned into a parking area to the right, facing the lake. The heavy-set driver never got out of the car, but the baby's alleged father did. Emma followed him and 2 others, while another 2 stayed by the car, its headlights cutting twin beams over the lake. They had a 6-pack of beer, and the premise of the trip was that they were supposed to go sit at that picnic table just around the corner at the path next to the lake and drink a beer. But the water, it was up high enough that it had reached the path that wound around the lake, and you had to walk through that water to get past a string of trees. Almost as soon as they got around the corner, the sounds started. Screaming and splashing and fighting. There was a pattern. Splashing and screaming, and then suddenly the screaming would stop, but the splashing kept going. And then she would pop up for air, and the screams would be heard again. She was fighting for air, She was fighting for her life. One of them, who stood back at the car, broke away from the other who was trying to hold them back. Ran straight into that water. Water that they knew was probably full of alligators. Oh God, maybe that's what's happening. Maybe gators got Emma, they thought. Because this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. And then the splashing and the screaming stopped and everything went quiet. And there was the sound of moving water. And some of them were coming back around that corner, around those trees. But then when they were lifted up and carried out of the water, they could see her out there. In the water, Emma, floating beneath the full moon, with her hair fanned out in the water, and nobody was stopping to help her. They kept going. They got back in the car and they just went home. It was just a prank, they said. It never happened. But the baby's alleged daddy, Donnie, didn't drive back to the house with them. And Emma never came back again. There was an overheard conversation soon afterward, something about needing an alibi, a word that stuck out to a kid who might not have understood it at the time, even what that word meant. But Donnie needed an alibi, he said. Maybe he could go over to that Holiday Inn down the road and pretend to get in a fight with that mouthy old man that's always there. Maybe break a beer bottle and cut him. Just enough to get thrown in jail for a while.
What better alibi than jail?
He said. Then sure enough, there's a memory of a commotion sometime later, a ruckus outside, and the baby's daddy, Donnie, was over in an apartment holding a man hostage with a weapon, and police showed up and arrested him, and he made a big deal of kicking at the window in the cop car. Just enough dramatics that everyone would remember the incident. Do you have any memory of Donnie being arrested in Florida?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me what you remember.
He had a hatchet after somebody or something. I don't know.
And it was nearby where you lived that the incident occurred?
I know the police got him there, as far as I remember. Because they had him out there, that's where he kicked or busted the window out of the cop car.
So you could see that happening from your house?
Yeah, it was like that in our yard.
Oh, okay, because he had thought he had someone held hostage in some...
He may have. Yeah, it was like at a bar or something, yeah, I think, or... yeah, or at the hotel, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Or did they come looking for him there, and that's where...
Yeah, they came, I guess they caught him there, or caught him outside or something.
Okay, so if you remember that, you remember it literally happening, seeing that happen.
Yeah, I remember that happening. Yeah.
Okay. Emma, I'm told, would be reported missing after that. And they wouldn't see Donnie, the baby's daddy, again for years. The rest of the family would shortly thereafter move to Marianna, Florida. Eventually, the youngest two boys would get big enough to fight back against the abusive Ronnie. A restraining order would be filed, and he would be hauled away to jail, and that 7-year relationship with their mother that was fraught with abuse would finally be over. But the scars, they would remain forever, for all of them.
It wasn't 2 or 3 months after it was disappeared that we would, I'd say 6 months at the most.
Okay.
I mean, and we knew no one was the place that we moved to either. It's kind of hard to uproot 5 kids, or 4 kids, well, 5 kids with a baby. And you know, when you don't have a car, you don't have a job, you know, you just move somewhere where you don't have no idea of anybody who lives there. I always, as an adult, I wondered how in the world they did that. We moved to a town called Marianna. We stayed there probably.
So all of you went to Marianna. Okay, all of you went to Marianna.
We all moved.
Okay.
All together. We moved back to Missouri a year or so, maybe later. I don't know.
And how long did Ronnie and your mother stay together?
Well, we moved from Marianna, Florida to Potosi, Missouri, and was there probably a year and a half. And we got tired of the beatings, and he went to beat on me one day, and my brother Jason and I beat the snot out of him, and Mom called the police, thought he was going to kill us, and they come and took his unconscious self and woke him up, and they hauled him to jail for domestic violence, or for, I don't know actually what they charged him with, but Mom called my aunt and uncle from Poplar Bluff, and my uncle come got us at night, and we hadn't seen him since either.
Well, I'm glad she got away from him, at least, all of you. The family essentially scattered to the wind. Like the white puffball of a dandelion, the seeds break free, floating away on the wind. Trauma is essentially the wind that scatters those seeds. It's hard to look at people whose pain you know intimately, people you associate with that pain, even if they weren't the ones who caused it. Even if you are all going through it together in your own way, because your pain is yours, alone. Some collective experiences are easier to contend with when you build walls between yourself and those who could give voice to the same pain. She's the bravest person I've ever known, her youngest brother told me. I think it also takes a fair amount of bravery to tell the truth when everything swirling around you begs to keep it hidden, when all of those other seeds landed somewhere else and they're all more comfortable in the spot where they grew because there's safety in distance. But the thing is, dandelions, while they are unique, they still all look the same. They can't escape their forever interconnectedness because they are all part of the flower from which they came. That sameness, though, well, that's a whole different kind of pain.
I know my birthday's in April, and we lived in Mariana probably a couple of months before my birthday. I know that because I had my 10th birthday was in Mariana. Because Roy had bought me a little personal birthday cake, and I brought it home for Roy. Roy and Rhonda had a place there, and we spent the night over there or something anyway, and they sent it home with me. Well, then, remember, Ronnie got my cake, and I said, and I was, man, it's my cake, really, and he beat the snot out of me. I was whining about my birthday cake, It was like a little bit, probably about the size of a saucer, just a one-person cake, and yeah. So I know for a fact we were there, but we were there probably a month or 2 or 3, maybe even 3 months before. So I know we weren't. We moved. I remember we moved, and school was back in was no. You know what? School wasn't back in session. School was getting ready to be back in session.
When you got there?
When we moved.
When you moved, so that would have been around.
Because but it would have been within a month or so after.
Yeah, September. I think school starts right at September or the end of August?
Yeah. Well, back then it was like after Labor Day, so.
So 1 or 2 months. 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I remember I rode my bike to my school to see my teachers because they were there for like teacher work and whatever, Anyway, and I parked my bike out in front, and Jason was with me. He rode his bike, and when we come back out after visiting with the teachers, gonna get on our bikes and ride back, and they done stole my bicycle. Somebody done stole my bicycle and ran out and took off with it. Well, when we was leaving, I remember seeing my bicycle. This little black kid was on my bicycle. There was about 4 or 5 of them riding bikes, and it just irked me, Like that's my bike.
Okay.
But the school wasn't back in session, but I remember it wasn't back. It was close to being back in session.
It was close to being back in session, but you didn't end up going to school in Florida for that school year.
No, we didn't. No, not in Orlando, no.
Yeah, so that means it was no more than like 2 months.
Right.
Less than that, because it starts. Yeah, she went missing July 10th. Then, less than 2 months. Which is, if you think about it, when your kid goes missing, the very last thing you want to do is leave the state, because where are they going to go if they come back?
Right. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I would say. Well, how am I going to find this? You know?
Yeah.
She never was going to find us, you know?
Yeah. In case you didn't hear that, he said, she never was going to find us, you know? It's so hard hearing a grown man come to harsh realizations in real time. Realizations that it's taken decades to come to terms with because for years you've been fed information that wasn't true, or only part of the story. We absorb things differently when we're kids, but we do tend to remember things that were important to us as kids, like your bike getting stolen, particularly when you're someone in a family that doesn't have much to begin with. The things that you do have actually mean something to you. Like a little personal birthday cake given to you by your brother that gets taken away by the abusive live-in boyfriend. In that clip, John recalled the end of their time in Florida and his sister Emma going missing in July of 1982. The kids were already out of school for the summer, and about a month later, he and his brother rode up to the school on their bikes to visit their teachers. Maybe it was one of those meet the new teacher things. And little did those boys know that their family would be uprooted yet again, this time without their sister Emma. How do you as a kid come to terms with that? How do you spend dark nights behind a strip club with your mom's boyfriend and siblings, supposedly waiting for your sister to come out because you've been told that she just ran away and was hanging out with strippers, and then suddenly all of that looking for her just stops, and they move you hundreds of miles away, still in the same state, but right there close to the border within spitting distance, basically in the middle of nowhere, where they knew no one. Even if she had wanted to, how would 14-year-old Emma have found them? It seems to me whoever was in charge of that move from Orlando already knew that Emma wouldn't be looking for them, because she couldn't. Emma Vaughn is missing. But more importantly, Emma Vaughn is missed. She is missed. If the story that I heard, the story that I told you, is true, and not just a figment of a traumatized memory, she's still out there, waiting for someone to find her. She's still waiting for someone who knows where she is to honor her memory with the truth. Emma deserved a whole lot more from this life than she got, but she deserves at least that much. And so did you. If you're listening, so did you. I want to say a quick thank you to those I spoke to this season, those who allowed me to record interviews and those who didn't. Everything you all told me was brave and important, and you honored Emma's memory by doing so. If you have any information about the disappearance of Emma Lorraine Vaughn, you can contact the Orlando Police Department. Ask to speak with Anne-Marie Isan at 407-246-2979. Music courtesy of Blue Dot Sessions.